to Stories with Brisco and Bradshaw. I would be Bradshaw, and that would be the WWE Hall of Famer, Oklahoma's favorite son, Mr. Gerald Brisco. And we have got the manager of champions. We have got the hardcore referee. We've got Fonzie himself. Bill Alfonso, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, guys, for even thinking about me to be on your show. It's really cool. And I've known Gerald Brisco since 1980. So I think I'm in the right place at the right time. So thanks, guys.
That's right, Bill. John and I talk about future guests and everything. And I said, our guest list cannot be complete without the referee, Wild Bill Alfonso, who goes back with me so far in the business. You're just about your entire career. I think you slipped one in on me in the beginning to get into Florida Championship Wrestling. And it's a great story. Bill, you want to lead us off with your introduction to me? Paul, the great Paul Jones, introduced as number one, introduced and then recommended you for a position, and you got up the nerve to come down to 106 Albany Street and walk up those creaky old steps and come into my office and sit down and lied your ass off to me.
Absolutely. I did work a little bit that day. So, Tampa was a hotbed of wrestling. My father, I didn't know anything about wrestling. My father came home with 2 comp tickets he got from the sports editor of Tampa Bay Times, Frank Klein. You guys used to put a little ad in the paper who was wrestling Tuesday nights, and they would comp him 2 tickets. So my dad came home with these 2 tickets, said, "Hey, Billy, I got tickets to wrestling." I said, "Wrestling? What the hell's that?" I didn't know anything about it, wasn't interested, but curiosity got me. So I used the 2 tickets I was about 12, 13 years old, went to the Armory Tuesday night, and there was Eddie Graham, that blonde hair, and Bobo and all these guys. I fell in love with the business that day. And so we used to go, I used to ask my dad, "Hey, please see Frank Klein, the sports editor, to give me those comp tickets." It was only $2 to get in back then anyway, but so I started going, and then eventually I started meeting the guys. I met King Curtis and Rocky Johnson and was getting sandwiches. I was a little runner for those guys and became friends and stuff. And then my best friend, Dave, the Cuban Assassin, they got him booked in Dallas. And Dave said, "Hey, Fonzie, you want to go with me to Dallas, and I'll take care of you, and you can try to break in. I'll tell them you're my little brother and that you're a referee, and maybe you can get some spots." So I went to Dallas.
Hey, Fonzie, how old were you then?
I was probably 19 or 20. So we went to Dallas. David was booked for the Von Erichs, so he said Gary Hart was a booker, and said, "Oh, I'm starting with you guys. It's my little brother. He's a referee. He'll be with me so we can never use him." So I was out there 6 months traveling to every show with Dave, but they had Bronco Lubis, David Manning, and a couple other referees. There was 4 territories in Dallas. The Von Erichs, Joe Blanchard in San Antonio, Paul Bosch only ran Houston, the best payoff man in the business. Jerry Briscoe's brother told me that, Jack Briscoe. And then they had the Funks in Amarillo. So there was 4 territories. But the whole 6 months I was there trying to, get a referee spot, I worked by accident. Something happened to the ref or something. They used me. So I actually worked for Joe Blanchard once or twice. I worked for the Von Erichs once or twice at the Sportatorium. I never worked for Paul Bosch in Houston, but then I worked for the Funks in Amarillo. My first match I got paid for $90 was a sellout in Amarillo. It was the Sheik and Terry Funk in a chain match. It was crazy. And so that was pretty cool. The time went by, so I've only worked 4 or 5 times in the 6 months. I said, "Dave," and then Dave got booked in Charlotte for the Crockett's. So I went to Charlotte with him for a few months, and they had Tommy Young and Stu Schwartz as a referee. So there was no way I could get in there. So I said, "Dave, I got to go home. I just can't live off of you buying my food for like in 8 months. You know what I mean? Let me go home and get a real job. There's no spot for me." And Paul Jones got wind that I was leaving, and Paul Jones liked me. And he said, "Hey, you going back to, you leaving, huh?" I said, "Yeah, Paul, I can't, there's no spot for me here. I got to go back to Florida." He said, "Well, listen, when you get to Florida, I want you to call Charlie Lay and try to get a meeting with Gerald Brisco. He's a really good friend of mine. Tell him I sent you, tell him you're referee," and so on and so on. So I came back to Florida, and I was really intimidated because this is where I spent my childhood watching these guys, Gerald Brisco, Jack, and Eddie Graham and these guys. So I finally worked up the nerve to call Charlie Lay. I said, "Hey, my name's Bill Alfonso, I'm a referee. Paul Jones sent me to see if I can get a meeting with Gerald Brisco. He was assistant booker for Dusty." And he said, "Okay, kid, come on in." And so he set it up. And this was a Monday where I went to meet Gerald Brisco. So I walk in, Charlie Lay, introduce myself. And Charlie says, "Go upstairs." I found Gerald in the office. Introduced myself. We chit-chatted for a minute. And he said, "Well, what experience do you have?" And I said, "Well, I work for Joe Blanchard. I worked for the Von Erichs. I worked for the Funks. I worked a little bit in Mid-Atlantic, which I did once or twice." And Gerald said, "Well, you got the qualifications, you know. And Paul Jones is a good friend of mine. He wouldn't have sent you, you know." And he said, "But unfortunately, Fonzie," this was a Monday, Gerald Brisco. He said, "Unfortunately, Fonzie, we have our referees here, but maybe this summer," this was May of 1980. He said, "Maybe this summer we might run 2 shows. So leave your number with Charlie Lay. If we can use you, we're grab you for and use you as much as we can or whatever." I said, "Thank you very much, and I appreciate it." And I walked out of there feeling really good, but with no job. They didn't say come for a tryout or anything. This is a Monday. I get a phone call Tuesday morning, and it's Charlie Lay. "Hey, you know how Charlie talked, Jerry. Hey, kid, Jerry wants to know if you can come tonight and work the armory, referee." I said, "Yes, sir. What time do you want me there?" He said, 7:00. So, of course, I came early and walked in, and I was thrilled. I walked in the dressing room. I was early, and Dusty was there. He said, "Are you the new referee?" I said, "Yes, sir." And it was only supposed to be for that night, but I found out why they called me, because I think the referee that they were using had the 3 main events, and Dusty was working the main event with one of the guys in the car, and had a flat tire on the way to West Palm Beach with no spare, and they missed the show. Dusty was fucking livid, fired the guy on the spot, didn't fire the 3 top guys, but fired the referee for having no spare. So
Wait a minute. That doesn't seem fair. If you're riding in the car, you don't know that the moron driving doesn't have a spare. So he got fired because of some idiot that he may have had nothing to do with, but he fired all of them?
No. He only fired the referee.
Oh, he fired the referee. Okay, all right. That makes sense.
That's where I come in. Dusty was livid, sold out.
He wasn't going to fire those main hills, man.
That's what I was thinking. I thought, how can you fire out?
So I go to the armory that night, Tuesday. So my childhood fucking where I watched wrestling every Tuesday night, I'd go. And somehow I did a good job. And at the end of the show that night, Gerald came up to me and said, "Hey, can you make Miami tomorrow?" I said, "Yes, sir." At the end of the Miami show, "Can you make Jacksonville Thursday?" I said, "Yes, sir. Thank you." And then Friday and Saturday were 2 spot shows. Wherever we would run the St. Pete Bayfront Center or Lakeland or high school somewhere or whatever. Friday and Saturday was usually a spot show. And then Sunday, Orlando. So I worked all week. And that Sunday after the show, Gerald Brisco comes up to me and says, "Congratulations, you're full-time with us. We like you. And just remember this, you can leave as fast as you came." I'll never forget those words. And I was green. I was relatively very green. I didn't know the business super, because I only worked, but I had watched and studied the business for a long time. But I was a natural for some reason. And then working with Dusty.
Bill, what it was, Bill, it was your memory. I mean, your memory, you'd receive finishes from me, from Eddie and Dusty, and our finishes were 20 minutes long. The match might be 22 minutes, but the finish was 20 minutes long.
Well, that's what I was just going
And
to
you could go word for word for those finishes. Back in there, John, as everybody knows, you know, the heels dressed on one side of the building, baby faces on the other side. The referee was our communicator. He had to carry each and every finish all the way back and forth. And
I'll give you a good example. I'll give you a good example. So Orlando, Eddie Graham Sports Complex, every Sunday, Dusty would want me there at 7 o'clock, not 7:05, not 6 after 7. I mean, 7 o'clock. I'd walk in the dressing room. This was after a little bit of time where I got used to these complicated finishes and all that. I'd meet Dusty at 7 o'clock. He'd have his booking sheet going over this match from the first match to the main event. Give me basically all the finishes, intermissions, times, everything. And then I'd go over to the heel side, which they never saw each other, and they will be waiting for me at 7:15. And I have everybody all in order. I say, okay, first match, Scott McGee and whoever, Dusty said 12 minutes on Sunset Flip, 1, 2, 3. And I go on and on. So that's how I learned the business so good. My mind got trained after, you know, several months and years. I was known as a really good referee. It took a while for Hiro Matsuda to like me and Eddie, because, you know, they thought I was a geek or something. You know, Eddie Graham I think Matsuda called me a geek one time. But after a while, I became his guy. Eddie Graham loved me. Matsuda loved me because I was really good at what I did. For some reason, I adapted to the business perfectly.
So, Fonzie, you were a young guy in the business and you're carrying finishes over there to the heels. Were any of them trying to politic their way out of it or kind of bully themselves into a better finish than what you gave them?
Yes, it was a sold out Orlando show, and I got the finish from Eddie Graham's special referee was Kevin Sullivan, and Dusty Rhodes, Eddie Graham's special referee. So Kevin's waiting for his finish, you know, is really excited. So I get the finish from Dusty. I go over to Kevin on the heel side. He said, "Bonnie, what's the finish?" I said, "Well, you want it diplomatically or you want to tell you like it is? Tell me like it is." I said, "The owner will nail you and the booker will cover you." That's all I said. You know what I mean? And he tells me that story all the time when I see Kevin. Did you guys just see him on Steve Harvey's show with J.J. Dillon?
Oh, I thought it was awesome. Did you see that, Jerry?
Oh, I haven't. What is it?
Oh, it's so good.
J.J. Dillon. Steve Harvey has a show like Judge Mathis, which I was on with Missy Hyde.
I saw that. That was great.
Yeah. It was a total work. You know what I mean? They both got money, and JJ looked good. He said he was 79 years old. I couldn't believe it.
JJ looked great. We had JJ on the show, and JJ was awesome on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. His mind was sharp as a tack. You know, I see him once in a while at the conventions. I see all you guys at these conventions, which is just a pleasure to, you know, be involved in. So
it was great, Jerry. They had Steve Harvey was the judge, and apparently JJ had loaned Kevin $7,500 and said pay him back whenever. And so it'd been 5 years, and Kevin hadn't paid him back yet. And so Stephen Harvey asked him, he goes, "When are you gonna pay him back?" And he read the definition of whenever in the dictionary. It was so funny. So he goes, "I'm still under time."
I thought it was great.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah, cool. So you're moving along now with Dusty. You're getting these finishes, you know, and Florida was heat driven back in those days, as a lot of the local territories were. I mean, even though you had the strong baby face, you had to have those killer heels, and they were always heat driven. Guys like Sullivan, Curtis, and Lewin, and Buddy Coat, all the greats that passed through here. It had to be a thrill, you know, you growing up here and seeing all those guys when you're a child. Now you're in a ring with them, and you're actually delivering their orders for the night, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, my first couple of years, I couldn't believe what I was doing. And then finally it registered. I said, okay, I'm in the business, you know, after a couple of years, and I got the respect after a couple of years of serving as a young referee and getting the finishes and being well liked. Eddie Graham fell in love with me because I was walking out of 106 North Albany, getting ready to jump in my car and driving to Miami after 2 hours of TV that morning. And some Mark said something stupid to me, wrestling's fake, or whatever he said. And I got in his face and we had a fight. And I beat the fuck out of him. For some reason, I was lucky. And Eddie Graham was watching this. And he, oh, Fonzie, that's my boy. He liked to see people get stretched. You know what I mean?
That was a thing down here, right, Bill? Kayfabe. I mean, it was strict down here. You didn't bust Eddie's kayfabe, or you were gone. I mean, the guys don't realize how important that was. You could get in all the fights you wanted to, but you better win every one of them, or not show up for work the next day.
Yeah, kayfabe was so big. When we would travel, we would have to tell Charlie Lay who we were riding with. Charlie Lay went, who are you riding with, Fonzie? And I would say, me, Kevin, Mark Lewin, and, Jake the Snake or something. He wanted to know exactly who we were riding with. No heels in the car, no baby faces together. In fact, you remember, of course, you remember Killer Carl Cox. He was fishing in Tampa Bay in his boat. Right. And he had some kid with him, young kid that he was working an angle with. And they thought he would be the next Jack Briscoe, but it didn't turn out like that. I can't remember the guy's name. You would know him. And Eddie Graham pulls up in his boat because he lived right there in the bay and said, put the guys, hey, you guys catching anything? And then the next day, the kid got fired for Carl Coxton, but the kid got fired for being babyface and heel in the same boat. Nobody fucking saw him, but that's how strict Eddie Graham was.
No, Eddie was. And speaking of fighting and speaking of protecting the boys, that's another thing. You quickly gained a reputation of protecting the guys from themselves. And one night I remember leaving Miami Beach Convention Center. Jack and I were on the fringes of turning heel against Mike Graham and Steve Kern. And you were traveling with us that night. We're walking out to the car to put our bags in the car, and this guy got a little wise with either me or Jack and started coming towards us, and you did that old Alfonso 1-2 punch, and he was down on the ground, and you jumped down on the ground with him and started hammering him, jackhammering him, and Jack ended up coming over and pulling you off the damn guy so you wouldn't kill him, man. So, but you always were protecting the guys. I think that's one thing that really helped your reputation, besides your ability to retain the finishes like you did.
Well, it was only on occasions that I would get in a fight, so it was built up in me. I wanted to fight now and then, I wanted to protect the business. So, but usually these guys were a lot bigger than me. My MO was I would put my face in the guy's chest so he couldn't hit me in my face. He could hit me in my head. Then usually some of the boys would say, hey, Fonzie's getting beat up, and they'd come over there and beat the fuck out of these guys. But I did enjoy that. I got a lot of frustrations out, and protecting the business was really, really big. Okay. My assistant, my beautiful niece, 26 years old, shoot this for me. She said, move up. Okay. I'm going to show you some cool pics in a few minutes.
I wondered how you got on this podcast so easy. You had your niece there setting everything up for you, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm grateful.
We go through that every week.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you got there in the backdrop there, Bill? Looks like some cool pictures, man.
All right, let me just show you. When I got to WC, let me tell you how I got to WCW, and I'll start giving you these pics. So Florida Championship Wrestling kind of folded at the end. And remember, the cables were taken out of WCW, and Vince, I was on the first Monday Night Raw too, ever, in 93 or 92, whenever it was. So Florida office closed up, and Dusty went to work for Ted Turner, and Crockett, and then TBS. And I really couldn't leave because I was fresh. Remember, my wife got sick, Jerry, with the kidneys, and we lost her. And she got so sick, she had 2 transplants, and we finally lost her after a 2-year battle. And I couldn't really leave out of Tampa because she was in critical condition for a while. And you guys paid me. I think the office paid me a little bit, and the boys would put a little bit. I'd get a little envelope. That was very cool. I'll never forget you guys for that. So anyway, the business folded, and I got a newborn baby, and my family's helping me with her, and so I couldn't go to TBS right away. Plus, I wasn't invited yet. So after a while, I get a phone call from Hiro Matsuda, and Hiro Matsuda says, "Hey, Bonzi, we're doing this." How much Hiro Matsuda liked me. After a while, I had to prove myself after years and years.
And here's a guy, Matsuda, who wasn't in your corner in the very beginning, and now you've won him over.
Called me a geek, and the way I mentioned something, he says, "You're a geek." But I won his respect after a while. I was really good at what I did. And so I get a phone call. It's Hiro Matsuda and says, "Hey, WCW and the Japanese office is running a joint show, first time ever. It's Fujinami against Ric Flair, 65,000 people in the Tokyo Dome, sold out. I want you to come referee the main event, Ric Flair and Fujinami." They had their own referees. WCW had all those referees, but Matsuda wanted me. So I was thrilled and I said, "Well, what can I do to look good and all that?" So of course, I got my haircut, beautiful, shaved, all the bow tie, and I had my mom, my dear old mom who passed away. She sewed a Japanese flag and an American flag because it was Fujinami against Ric Flair, American against Japan.
What a working guy you were, man.
I had a designer shirt, beautiful bow tie, nice pants, beautiful shoes, everything. And I waited till I got in the dressing room, and I got dressed close to Dusty in the Japanese office. And when I put that shirt on, all the Japanese owners, Fujinami, they liked the shirt. You know what I mean? So I was over. So I refereed that match. It was outstanding. I did a fucking outstanding job. Took my bump, bam, and it was a controversy finish. And the next day I was on the cover of the Japanese magazine, holding up the largest athlete on the planet's hand with that shirt on, if you can see it.
Cool.
So we were in Japan, and we went to the after party, and all the American guys were there, and it was time to go back to the hotel, and the cabs would pull up and take three guys, and I stayed with Dusty purposely. I want to jump in the cab with Dusty to get his opinion what happened that night. Maybe he might put me over. So everybody left, and the last cab pulled up, and it was me, Dusty, and Ric Flair. The main events in the Booker, right? So Dusty and Ric Flair were talking because they couldn't really talk at the after party, all the boys and shit. So they were talking real serious shit in the cab going back to the Keo Plaza, the hotel. And all of a sudden, Dusty says, "Hey, Nature Boy, who we got in the back? Who we got back there? Oh, who we got?" I'm sitting in the front seat of the cab, and Dusty, look at that, baby. Dusty and Flair were in the back seat, and Dusty says to Flair, "Hey, Nature Boy, who we got in the front seat?" And they put me over. "Oh, that's Fonzie and shit." And Dusty said, "Hey, baby, it's gonna happen for you. It's gonna happen for you, baby. It's gonna happen. I'm gonna have Jody call you." I said, "Thank you, Dusty." A couple of days later, fucking Jody Hamilton calls me, and a couple of days later than that, I'm making $100,000 a year. Signed the contract with WCW. Unbelievable. Then they put me with Giant Gonzalez to be his personal assistant. Because, the largest athlete on the planet was thrilling, and he was pretty cool. And I traveled the world with him, did movies and all kind of shit, Baywatch with him.
Bill, tell us a little bit about Giant Gonzalez. He's a forgotten giant, if there can be such thing. I mean, but this guy was absolutely huge and a good-looking young man. He didn't have that.
He didn't have the giants. He
Right.
had it, but his jaw wasn't protruding and all that yet. He was a young.
He must have been a knockout with all the ladies around.
I'll tell you a great story about that. So, he was playing European basketball. He was legitimately 7'8", but they built him as 8 foot, and he could pass for 8 foot. So they brought him one of Turner's guys that owns Turner owns the Hawks, the Braves, CNN, fucking, is a billionaire. So he had a scout in Europe, and they spotted Giant Gonzalez playing basketball. So they approached him and said, "Hey, Turner wants to bring you in and play for the Atlanta Hawks, NBA." So they brought him in, but his knees were already a little messed up for being a giant and playing basketball, but he couldn't play 70% in the NBA could play, 25%. The NBA guys are on, but so Turner says, look, you can't pass inspection for the NBA, but on this thing called wrestling, we're going to make you wrestler. And the Giant said, wrestling? What's that? Didn't have a clue. That's why he wasn't a good worker. He didn't know how to really sell. He's so awkward, but it's the attraction, the 8-foot giant. So they trained him a little bit and put him right in the ring. And he needed somebody with him at all times to drive him around. He wasn't knowledgeable. And so Dusty asked me, they gave me an extra 25 grand a year to drive around. I said, you don't even, that's not even necessary, because it was all the perks and stuff I got from being with the Giant, and we became really good friends. I was with him 3 years, and he was a beautiful guy, and the women loved him for some reason. A tall Argentina, dark hair, beautiful, and the women would love him, and not the girls that went to wrestling. We used to call them rats back then. I hate to say that, but we arena rats. But not the rats so much loved him. I mean, we'd go to the mall. We had housewives following us around, beautiful. So here's an example of Giant Gonzalez and the girls. So I was traveling with them, and it would be very common for me to get a phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'd be at the next room. We would never split a room, of course. He would say, Fonzie, can you go to give me 4 or 5 hamburgers? I'm hungry. I can't sleep. So it's my job as his assistant to go get him whatever he wanted and bring back me, go back to sleep. So I got phone calls like that a couple of times a week, on the road. And so he calls me one night. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I go to his room thinking I'm going to go get him a hamburger or something, or 4 or 5 hamburgers. So I knock on his door. He answers it. He's an 8-foot giant, naked, answers the door naked. I said, Giant, why are you naked? And he opens the door, and there's a beautiful blonde girl in the bed, naked as this jaybird. I said, what do you need me for? He says, well, we got a problem. And I'm kind of embarrassed because, like a Pamela Anderson beautiful. We met her at the mall.
Naked.
He's naked and she's naked on the bed. And he says, look, I need a favor, Fonzie. I said, anything, Johnny, we're going to get you for what? He says, no, my girth on my thing is too fat. I can't get it inside the girl. I said, okay. He said, I want you to jump on her and warm her up for me. And then maybe after that, you leave right away. And then I take over. And now I'm looking at the girl. She says, Fonzie, please help us. This girl's freaking beautiful. I'm embarrassed as shit. I'm red. So my job that night was to warm up a beautiful broad for the Giant. You know what I mean? And it only happened one time, but it's
only in the wrestling business.
Right. And I tell that story different times in different places, and people love it for some reason.
Did he watch you naked?
Oh yeah, he was right there waiting for me, waiting so you jump on her,
Was he your coach?
We lost Bill after that.
We're back. Hold on.
The giant spirit came and got him.
Okay, there. But that's a story, pretty cool, being with the largest athlete on the planet. And I
was going to ask you what was your most unusual challenge, but that pretty well answered my question.
Yeah, that pretty well answers it really well.
But
there was common things to do too, like
Bill, did it make you nervous that you're warming this up with this wonderful, beautiful woman, and this 8-foot tall giant is watching you naked?
Standing over you.
Well, we were such good friends. I didn't mind being naked because we were naked in the dressing room taking showers. And so, how the boys on the road, we take showers and go to the next town and stuff.
Yeah, but this seems a little different.
Yeah, just to let you think, John.
I never thought of that way. I never thought he might,
There weren't any slaps on the cheek or anything like that.
No, it was
faster.
Was there a critiquing going on or anything?
No, he asked me to perform a service for him, and he listened, and he didn't say a word, and then I warmed her up, and she said, "Okay, Giant, I'm ready." And okay, see you later. They both thanked me, and I left. I was there 15 minutes.
Did you get a bonus for that?
I got bonuses all the time because I got the help that beautiful girl out. That was a bonus. And then just being with the Giant period. The bonuses were flying to, they wanted him to be on Baywatch in an episode. They wanted him to be on the pilot shoot for Thunder in Paradise, Hogan's TV show for a couple of years. The bonus was for me when Turner called the wrestling office and said, "Hey, I want the Giant to go sit in my box where me and Jimmy Carter would sit and watch the Braves because they were winning World Series in the 90s. The Braves were real hot. So the camera would be on the ball game and then pan over. Hey, the Braves are doing so good. Even the Giant, the largest athlete on the planet, comes, and I'm sitting right next to the Giant Ted Turner's booth, you know? So that's my kind of perks, you know, so that was pretty cool.
Did he enjoy the business?
He did, but it was hard on him because he was the Giant. He was an actual Giant. It was hard for him to travel. The only car he would fit in half-ass comfortable would be a Cadillac. So the office rented me a Cadillac, oh darn, for 3 years. You know, every day I had a brand new caddy from Avis. He adapted to it, and he was trying to understand it. He had a good time because, you know, the boys, you know, we were hanging out. He wasn't a drinker at all. He wasn't a pot smoker, no drugs, absolutely pretty straight, but he did like the girls. He did like the girls. So he adapted to the business pretty good, but not in the ring. He wasn't really talented in the ring. He's only been in the business a few years, and they really didn't teach him that good. And plus, he was just an attraction.
Bill, I was going to ask you a little bit about the training. I don't think he really had any actual training. I think they just kind of showed him a couple of things and threw him out to the wolves, right?
Exactly. That's why he was never a polished worker. And he used to do certain things. I said, Giant, don't do that. You can't throw a punch. 100% don't throw a punch. You do the couple big man stuff. That's all you need to do, because usually they wouldn't put him in with at a main event. They would put him in as a, you know, one of the top 3 matches as an attraction, and he'd work with like Curtis Hughes or something, bam, 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 big thing, and beat him. You know what I mean?
You know, we all had our guys that we had to follow. John had to follow Blackjack when he was a Blackjack. You had to follow the great Stu Swartz. I had to follow the great Jack Briscoe. Was the Giant, did he ever feel any pressure to be Andre, or how the guys backstage? Because I was really never around Gonzalez that much. Was he accepted by the guys? Was he a pretty likable guy?
He was accepted he was accepted by everybody. Loved him because he was like a kid, basically. You know, he was thrilled to be in the business, and then being around the Steiners and all these talented, all these personalities, which loved him because he was the tallest athlete on the planet. I think the only guy that was almost as tall as him played for Houston. Remember Ming, the basketball player that played for...
yeah, that guy from China.
Right. That was the other Giant, but my Giant was bigger. So just the boys being around him, they were amazed every night at his size. They always put him over, and he was a joker, and you know...
Was the guy a pretty good athlete too?
Oh yeah, he was playing European basketball for years. That's why his knees got burned out. He couldn't play for the NBA, or else he would have been playing for the NBA for a couple of years.
But his problem mostly in the business. This is your judgment only. What was his big? He just didn't have enough training, or just.
I think it was that, and he didn't really get how to tell a story. He couldn't sell. If you hit him, he'd sell. You watch a match with. I was a referee, WrestleMania 9, and he worked against The Undertaker. And we had a pre-match before that. You know how Vince wants it, like the week before, we were at some little spot show in WWF, and we had the same match we'd have at WrestleMania. And when he choke slams me, and that's the DQ and all that, when he choke slammed me, he brought me down so hard, he knocked me out. I was out cold. I said, fuck, you know, and but then they had the match at WrestleMania. He let me down easy. But if you watch that match, go back. Anybody watching this podcast, go back and watch that. You can see that the Giant really didn't have that. He wasn't a classic worker by no means.
How did he
It
like
wasn't
the
his
business?
fault. It wasn't his fault.
How did he like the business? Was he in once he said, because this kind of just throwed on him, he couldn't run that basketball court no more because of his knees and his ankles.
Correct.
And then Turner goes to him, "Hey, I got a big investment from you on you. I'm not going to lose you. You're going to be a wrestler."
Right.
How was that transformation him mentally backstage?
It was pretty good because they gave him a big contract. I think they started him off at 250 a year, then the next year 350, next year 450. So he enjoyed that, those big checks that we getting bi-weekly. Said Turner Home Entertainment, like in a big check like that. So he liked it. He adapted to it. He actually loved it because he liked being around the boys. He liked the camaraderie of us and what we were trying to do. But
And how did you end up going to WWE from WCW with the Giant?
well, I went from WCW to WWF. Let me tell you how I got there. So we were in WCW, me and the Giant, for a couple of years, and then a new guy came in, a new director of WCW. He was the manager of a Pizza Hut or something, Jim Hurd. Didn't know anything about wrestling, but he knew how to manage big corporations and shit. So he came in and immediately he came up to, not the same day, but he came in after a couple of weeks. He approached me and the Giant says, "Hey, we need everybody to take a pay cut because we're only making X amount of dollars. And then if it builds back up," but the Giant already had a contract. And the Giant told me, he says, "Fonzie, I'm not taking no pay cut." And I said, "I don't want you either, but what are we going to do?" He says, "You know anybody in WWF?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Here's our options. I can go back and play European basketball, or if you know somebody in WWF, let's see if they're interested in it." So J.J. Dillon, who I worked for years, he was Dusty's assistant booker after Gerald Brisco and was real involved in the office there. And J.J. loved me after a while. So I said, "Yeah, I know J.J. Dillon. He's Vince's personal assistant." He said, "Well, call him and see if they're interested." So I got through to JJ somehow. I called WWF Stamford, Connecticut in the office. "WWF, how can we help you?" He said, "Yeah, my name's Bill Alfonso. JJ Dillon, please." And I guess they buzzed JJ, and JJ took my call right away because he knew who I was and respected me. So I says, "JJ, let me explain the situation to you. I'm the personal assistant for Giant Gonzalez, and Jim Hurd came in and they want us to take a pay cut. We're weighing our options. He can go play European basketball, maybe if there's a spot for you guys." And, more detailed than that, I was explaining. He says, "Well, listen, Fonzie, I appreciate the call. Let me run it by Vince." And this was like a Tuesday, and the Giant just had a operation on his foot. He had a spur that they had to cut out. So we were laid up at my parents' house by Jerry Briscoe's house on the lake house on the golf buggy. He had a great time. And they said, "Hey, let me talk to Vince and I'll get back with you. Thank you so much for calling me." So the phone, we hang up and I tell the Giant, "We're at my parents' house on the lake." I said, "Well, JJ said, he's going to talk to Vince and they might be interested." And about 20 minutes later, the fucking phone rings. It's JJ Dillon. He says, "Fonzie, I talked to Vince and he's interested. When can you guys come up and have a meeting?" I said, "Well, the Giants just had a spur operation and, we're laid up for 5 or 6 days. We can come up anytime." "Okay, how about tomorrow?" I said, "Perfect." I said, "The Giants got to have a first class seat and I'll sit and coach, because he's so big." So they put us both in first class. So the limo picked us up and we got off the plane. A limo picked us up and took us to Vince's house, not the office. So me and the Giant walk into Vince's house. There's Vince in his bright suit with tennis shoes on, just how hyper he was eyeing us out and eyeing the Giant out and talking to us. And he said, "I know you, you're very athletic." That's all he said to me, basically. And, I explained why we're there and Jim Hurd and all that. And then I said, in fact, they still owe the Giants 60 grand, for his next paycheck. And he says, "Hey, don't even go back there. I'll give him a 60 grand signing bonus. JJ wrote him a check." So JJ wrote him a check out. "Don't even go back to WCW. Fuck those people." And and you, Fonzie, you can referee, bam, because I'm his assistant, and referee. So I do 2 jobs with Vince Light. And Giants is Vince. I haven't been home in a couple years for Christmas. Do you mind if I go home and I start, after the first of the year? He said, of course, give us time to think and put the gimmick on you and all that. And he said, Fonzie, do you want to start with the Giant in January? I said, no, sir. I wouldn't mind starting as soon as possible. He said, JJ, put him on the sheet. So JJ opens his book and starts putting me here, there. And JJ gives me a sheet, and I got a full week of work, without the Giant. I'm going to be referee. And it said MSJ. I said, JJ, where the hell is MSJ? He said, Fonzie, that's Madison Square Gardens. I didn't, because WCW did go up there. I've never been to Madison Square. That's Vince's territory. So my first week with WWF, I'm in Madison Square Gardens. I'm the new referee, and I got hit.
I hope you took Chimmel's place.
Listen, I got hit with all the referees because I'm walking into Madison Square Gardens. I don't want to look like the audience, you know what I mean? So I had a beautiful suit on. I had a Submariner Rolex. I had nice luggage, my hair in place. I walk in and all the referees are in Zubas and T-shirts and, tennis shoes, casual, because we're busting our ass, on the road. And Vince called me right over to the ring and said, hey, all you referees, come over here. He said, you see how Fonzie's dressed? That's how I want everybody to dress.
That's heat.
That's heat. And you pay for me, then you big events. And the referees, God, Dave and her, why'd you fuck Fonz? I said, I want to look good, guys. So I got a little heat. And plus, I had the Giant and get all kind of extra perks and shit and making as much money as those guys. You know what I mean? So it was pretty freaking cool. Now so that's how I got to WWF.
You mentioned a little earlier that you were on the very first Raw. Is this when you went to MSG? Was this the Raw, or was this just your first appearance?
Well, my first week in WWF was Madison Square Gardens plus wherever else we were, and then Vince had, I guess, like a month after I was there, he wanted to start Monday Night Raw at the Manhattan Center.
Right.
And you do one live show, one Monday Night Live, and then Tuesday and Wednesday we would tape for the next 2 Monday nights, only one Monday Night Live Raw, but I was on that one and I refereed. So my claim is not to make me famous or anything, but just the fact that I was on the first Monday Night Raw makes me cool.
Fonzie, what did you think about that first Monday Night Raw? Not the show itself, but the concept. I mean, did you have any idea that this would become the cornerstone of WWE?
No. Nobody did, but Vince.
You thought it was another show.
I thought it was a little more than another show, but I didn't get to explain detail what Vince had in mind. Vince has these big thoughts, and look how it turned out. The longest running TV series in the history of television, and still it's going to go on for another 20 years, I think, and I hope. So nobody knew how big it was going to turn out. But after a while, we did, After a while, Monday Night Raw was Monday Night Raw, brother.
Yeah, it's just interesting. Sometimes you do something, you think, oh, this is going to be something great. And then it doesn't work out that way. And then sometimes you have something that you put in place and think this might be good. And all of a sudden it turns into something, iconic like Monday Night Raw.
Yeah, the same thing with ECW. Now it's still a cult following worldwide. We only ran 5 years. We did 22 pay-per-views. I was on all 22 and I had a great spot. That's why I'm still relevant to the business. That's why I'm doing the shows. I'll read out my booking sheet for this month, and you guys say what? What was I saying? Fuck, I forgot.
Talk about iconic shows. Hey, before we go on a little bit, whatever happened to Giant Gonzalez?
Well, his body after 3 years wasn't doing too good. He became diabetic. He used to tell me all the time, Fonzie, I'm going to die young, because like Andre died at 43 and all the Giants die young. And it used to break my heart to hear him say that, but his health was failing. And being on the road 7 days a week, 7 to 10 days off 3 isn't an easy feat for me and you, John, or me and Jared Brisco. That's not an easy feat for us. Can you imagine being 8 foot and not being in good shape after a while, and being diabetic and all that? And after it was just too much for him. And he made a bunch of money. He might have made maybe $1 million or $1.5 million in the 5 or 6 years, or 4 or 5 years, he was in the business. So he did really well, went back to Argentina. And then eventually, you know, I stayed in touch with him. And then eventually I got a phone call from his brother who was deathly sick, and he passed at the age of 47.
What did he do back in Argentina? Did he just retire and
Yeah,
live off
yeah,
his
he
money?
retired. He retired. He made money. He was very frugal with his money, not with me. He used to, you know, buy me dinner and all that, but almost like the Sheik, Sabu's uncle, the original Sheik, not the bowling pin Sheik. I would go eat with the Sheik once in a while, and he would say, "Order like you're buying, and I'll pay." You know, so if I know you're buying, I'm going to order a steak and a lobster. If I know I'm buying, I'm going to order.
I do that to Mr. Briscoe all the time. I just order stuff. I order stuff on Amazon and charge it to him.
I wonder what my Amazon. I got my Amazon bill the other day, and I don't even recall this Texas gimmick store.
Hey, you guys do a podcast on a regular basis, a weekly or monthly? How do you guys hook up?
Zoom.
Jerry hired me in 1995, December 1995.
Well, you guys both have something in common, man. I'm responsible for both of your asses.
The two greatest things Mr. Briscoe ever did was hire me and you, Fonzie.
I love it. I love it. Congratulations, John. You've had an outstanding career. You did really well for yourself, right?
I think so. I had to make Mr. Briscoe proud. He hired me and then beat me up about 2,000 times.
The longest reigning SmackDown champion of all time, Bill Alfonso, is John.
I love it.
Yeah, so.
I love
it. We've had a great run. We've had so much fun. And what we did, Bill, was we were during COVID, and we were talking on text and on the phone, and somebody said, a friend of ours, Yoshi, said, "Why don't you guys do a podcast?" And I don't think anybody even want to listen to it if we did. And they said, "Well, no, you might put smiles on people's faces." And that's the reason we did it. We did it just to tell stories and let people have some fun. You know, we don't bury anybody. We don't try to bring up.
Yeah, you see how we're talking now. It's all cool. You know, I'm not burying nobody. I would never do that.
No. And most of our guys don't. You know, we don't tell them not to, but most of them just don't. It's just like sitting around the locker room or in a bar or in a car. You know, it's just for us. It's
Exactly. You guys want to hear how I got into ECW and had a 5-year run and made $250,000 working 2 days a week for 5 years there?
Let's hear it. Yeah, that's
okay.
Absolutely.
If you could bury Paul Heyman, we'll
I can bury Paul Heyman. And you can also bury Tony Chimmel. I mean, like for real. You can actually kill him and bury him.
Yeah. And we'll supply the shovels.
Mike Chioda was the one that treated me the best, but all those reps up there thought they were the shit, you know what I mean, and better than me or whatever. And I was the last one they hired. But anyway,
so you got any Tony Chimmel stories?
Not really, because I didn't hang with him. I was with the Giant my whole time. So it was me, and the Giant didn't really want anybody in the car with us. So it was just me. I drove and took him all over the fucking planet for 3 years, just me and him. Very rarely did somebody jump in the car with us. On an emergency, they would, but you know, we'd give him a ride to the next town. But Giant just like me and him, you know, he's kind of a not shy guy, but just wanted to be me and him. So
not a shy guy when he bangs on your door and says, "Come over."
That's right. Yeah, that's not a shy guy.
I was really embarrassed.
You don't have to say
night.
He's not shy. We know he's not shy.
I was embarrassed that night, but it's a great story. People like it, you know, and it's the truth. I swear, this is a true story, you know.
I figured you would like Chioda. You and Chioda seem a lot alike. Two good guys.
Yeah, they just fired him.
Yeah, after 30-something years.
Can you believe it? And he was still in shape and all that. I don't know why Vince does that, but Vince doesn't have any problems. I still like Vince.
So Wild Bill, you have that great run with WWE with the Giant Gonzalez, but you're Bill Alfonso is Mr. ECW. How did you make that switch over from WWE? Did you make it immediately from WWE to ECW, or was there?
Absolutely.
Did you go back
it was WWF. So
sorry.
How I got released, the Giant went home. You know, he finished up and went home, and for some reason, in that few months, the business took it down. You know, they weren't selling out everywhere. The business was down about 70% or something. And Vince came up to me and said, "Fonzie," or Pat Patterson came up to me and said, "Fonzie, unfortunately, we're going to have to release you from your contract because the business isn't doing good. But don't worry, when we come to Florida, you work all the Florida shows, and we use you as much as we can. Susan business picks back up, we're going to use you. So remember, I said they taped 3 Monday Night Raws, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So I got released after doing the 3 Monday Night Raws. So I was still on TV for a month, on Monday Night Raw. So Paul Heyman found out that I got released, and Paul Heyman calls me. The reason Paul Heyman called me is because in the early 80s, Bob Roop was booker in Florida, and I was the assistant booker for Bob Roop for Eddie Graham in Florida. Had that great job like you did. I earned that spot. And Paul Heyman was there as a young kid in a pair of Levi's, tennis shoes, and a t-shirt. He came down like I went to Texas, was trying to break in business. He came down with a guy named Tombstone, wasn't in the business too long, and he was going to do the loop for a few months with the Tombstone and, and try to get a spot. He wanted to be a manager, but there was no spot for him. So Tombstone got his notice and he was leaving, and Paul Heyman comes up to me, assistant booker for Florida, and says, "Hey, Fonzie, we're leaving in 2 weeks. Is there any way possible you think I could go to the ring and act as Tombstone's manager, for the 2 weeks?" And Tombstone was working with Scott Hall. Scott Hall was God bless Scott Hall, giving a big press slam and cover him 1, 2, 3, everybody. And I said, "Well, Paul Heyman, let me think about it. Okay, that sounds good, but look, you wearing a pair of Levi's with holes in them. You got old set of Converse on the t-shirt. Do you have money to go buy a suit and, look like a fucking manager?" He said, yes. So I didn't know his parents were millionaires, lived in Scarsdale. His dad's a big time money family. Of course, he went out and bought a beautiful suit, did his hair, bought the telephone, everything. And so he did the loop for 2 weeks, Monday, Tuesday, West Palm, Tampa, Miami, Jacksonville, spot shows in Orlando for 2 weeks. And then he left. And he thanked me for that, for letting him come to because I had a little stroke. I was assistant booker to Bob Roop. Bob Roop wasn't a genius. I was running the office because I was just doing what Dusty would do. I was helping Bob Roop so much, and he was getting all the credit, and I got a little bit of credit. But so Paul Heyman thanked me, and the next thing I know, Paul Heyman's a big star and for Vern Gagne and all that, and TBS and everything. And so I just left WWE, got my notice, and they said they'd use me and so on and so on. But I get a phone call the first week I left WWE, WWF. I don't have a contract. I'm a little depressed. I said, damn it, but I saved money and I was okay financially, but I was, I want to work.
This is basically the first time you've been out of work since you called me in 106 Albany.
Correct. May of 1980. That was May of 1980 when I met you, Jerry Brisco, and I've been on the road until 1995.
Wow, 15 years you got out of me.
I got a phone call from Paul Heyman because I was good to him. Remember I told you the story? I let him manage the guy and all that. He never forgot that. He said, "Hey, Fonzie," Paul Heyman said, "Hey, Paul, damn, I seen you on TBS. Good for you. And Vern Gagne and all that. Congratulations." I said, "Hey, why are you calling me?" He says, "Well, I got this company in Philly called ECW." I said, "What the fuck's an ECW? I've never worked for a company other than mainstream. Ted Turner, Vince, all the big terror Florida." He said, "Well, with this upstart company, we're hardcore. I got this vision. I got a perfect spot for you for 4 weeks. You come in, because you're still on Monday Night Raws for 2 more weeks, and you come in as an anti-ECW. You're sports entertainment, because Vince wants the doctor, his wife, and the 2 kids at ringside. Our target audience is males from 19 to 30 years old, hardcore fighting tables and chairs and shit." So I went in there, was anti all the ECW stuff, and was like a conservative referee and would stop the match with a little bit of juice and so on and so on. So I was getting heat. And after the 4 weeks, 911 choke slammed me and I was done. But Paul Heyman had a vision, and everybody knows Taz. You guys heard of Taz, right?
Right.
He's big time with AEW commentator, whatever. And Taz had like 4 or 5 gimmicks. Monkey Boy, Tasmania, didn't get over until he got hurt, was out for a little while. Then when he came back in, he came back as himself, Taz. And then he got over. usually we get over with, like I'm over because I'm hyper, and Paul Heyman says just hyper.
You're a gimmick.
So Paul Heyman thought it'd be a good idea for me to put me as a manager with Taz, and it worked. And people bought it and they loved it, but I didn't know how to. You would think I would know how to do a promo, but I never did. I've done 8 promos in 25 years of being a referee. Hey, you threw over the top rope. I seen this one. So I was having trouble doing promos, and Paul Heyman says, "Hey, Fonzie, just treat it like a shoot. You're going to be in Philly. You're going to work against this guy." And I said, "Okay, let me try it." Then I became One Take Fonzie. I said, "Yeah, next Tuesday night, Daddy, I'm going to be on the broadcast." And it was good. It was natural. And then Taz didn't need me, and they put me with Sabu on the first pay-per-view, Barely Legal. I turned on Taz and went with Sabu. And so I was there 5 years until Vince bought the company.
You with your promos. I've known you forever, as we've discussed, and when I saw you cutting promos, they were off the chart great. But that really didn't surprise me, because you're always a smack talker. I mean, we'd be in a ring sometimes, the fan would say something wise, and you just turn. And without the guy ever hearing it, just start cutting a promo basically on the guy sometimes.
Well, the business rubbed off on me. I was around all the great promo guys.
And so you with that microphone, after a while, it just seemed natural coming from you. It didn't seem, it seemed like it was your character, because it basically was your character, because they told you just to look at it as a shoot. And that's the Bill Alfonso I know that would look at it like that.
And they just told me to tone it up a little bit, be 30% more hyper, and it absolutely worked. And I was on 22. I was on all the main events. I was at 22 pay-per-views there, and I'm not bragging on the $250,000, but $250,000 for a small company that nobody heard of, ECW, and working Friday and Saturday is fucking pretty big payday, in 5 years. That's it's $50,000 a year, but working just weekends and enjoying it.
I saw a quote that was attributed to you that Paul Heyman never bounced a check to you, because of the story about Paul Heyman, but you said that all your stuff always cleared, right?
Well, the company was making $13 million a year, but we were spending $14 million. We were borrowing money from Paul to pay Peter. We had no corporate sponsors, and some guys were getting small money. Some guys were getting better money. Paul paid me decent, really good, and for some reason he took care of me. I'm in the main events with Van Dam and Sabu and all that stuff. And in fact, he gave me the second largest check I've ever got. Vince paid me $5,000 for WrestleMania. I refereed 2 matches in WrestleMania 9. $5,000 is not a bad payday. So we did the first pay-per-view, Barely Legal. I'm proud of this to say that, but not embarrassed. John, you made fucking way. $5,000 is nothing to you on those WrestleManias, but because so Paul, we did the first pay-per-view, Barely Legal, in ECW, and he said, "Fonzie, I don't know what to pay you. You know what I mean? In the main event, this and that." I says, "Well, pay me the same thing Vince paid me at WrestleMania." He said, "How much?" I said, $5,000. He cut me a check for $5,000, and boom. So the little indie ECW.
Fonzie, isn't that strange negotiating when the guy who's paying you negotiates with you about what to pay you and ask you?
Yes. Yeah, I didn't know how to answer that. I didn't know.
I wouldn't have either. I wouldn't have either.
It was a good answer, I guess.
And it's one of those things where you say $5,000, and he goes, "Okay," and you're like, "Damn, I should have said 12."
I don't think I would have got 12, but I was thrilled because I figured the biggest paycheck I got in the wrestling business for me was WrestleMania, $5,000 to referee a match. And then he matched it. So I didn't know what to ask for, I was thrilled to get that.
Bill, you brought up a real interesting character, Sabu. I know you went back. Tell us a little about Sabu and how you met Sabu, the original Sheik, and your conversations with him, because I know you.
Well, I told you when how I met the original Sheik, and I was traveling around Texas with Dave,
right?
And Dory Funk called Von Erickson, said, "Hey," they would send up guys that do TV. There was 3 different TVs in Texas. So the Amarillo, and there was a whole different territory. So they, I guess Dory called Fritz and said, "Hey, send me David Sierra, send me this guy, and send Dave's brother, the referee." So I'm thrilled. I'm going to go up and work a house show in Amarillo. Or it might have been Lubbock. And the main event was the Sheik and Terry Funk, as I said, in the chain match. And the Sheik, was the Sheik. And Terry Funk said, "Hey, Fonzie, go over and ask the Sheik if he got a blade. I need a blade." And I went, "Excuse me, Sheik, Terry Funk wants to know if you got a blade." I was kind of embarrassed. And he goes like this, "Does it look like I know what a blade is, kid?" So anyway, the finish of the match was, controversy. They were bleeding and all kind of stuff. And the Sheik pulled out a pencil and ripped my shirt up, and he stabbed me in the arm. I still got the lead mark right there from the stab where the Sheik, he didn't mean to stab me, but maybe he did, But he tore me up and beat me up and shit. So when I went to WCW and they put me with Sabu, I told him that story. And immediately, that's his uncle who trained him, and said I was over with Sabu for the Sheik stabbing me and shit, and showed him the lead mark and stuff. So we clicked instantly. Plus, I was good at doing my promos because I've been with Taz for a year, So I was one take Fonzie, and him and I just clicked good. And I just spent a couple weeks. In fact, I'm with him this month doing a big convention in Ohio, and I just did a seminar with him and some school and did some appearances with him lately. His body's so beat up from, if you ever saw Sabu, it was violent tables and going through all this crazy bumps, man. He can barely freaking walk. We just did a guest appearance for GCW. It's this new company. They're kind of doing pretty good. We did it at Hammerstein Ballroom in New York. And we were doing a thing. We weren't advertised. Lights off, lights on. There we are in the ring. Sabu pie faced the guy with the chair. We get a big pop and all that. So we had to set up a chair from the floor to the chair to the apron for him to get in the ring. His body's just terrible. And plus, he just lost his spouse, Melissa, his girlfriend or wife.
I didn't mean to cut you off. It's a great story about Sabu. When Bobby Duncum Jr. passed away, Bobby and I were tag team partners. In fact, we thought we were going to go somewhere. Then Bobby's dad and Bobby both wanted to play more football. Bobby played a little more football, and then he got hurt. He had tons of surgeries. And I think that's, where some of his problems started. But when he passed away, I did the eulogy for Bobby's funeral, and Sabu came because he was good friends with Bobby. And I remember him being on the phone with Paul Heyman, and Heyman was wanting him to come to a show, and Sabu said, "This is more important." And I always had tons of respect for Sabu and love for him for doing that for a friend in Bobby Duncum. I thought that was really cool.
Sabu's a pretty stand-up guy, and he's business as hell, but he believes what he believed. He wanted to be a Bobby Duncum Jr., And hey, I was fortunate enough to work with Bobby Sr. and the kid too. So it was pretty cool, man. I've come across
Junior was a big old man, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
Junior was too. Junior was just a little more, he was muscled. Junior was a great athlete. Junior started all 4 years at University of Texas. And Mr. Brisco will bring up the fact that his team never beat Oklahoma. Bobby hated that. Booker T used to bring that up all the time. At one time, Bobby told the bus to pull over in Japan. He wanted to fight Booker over Booker telling him that.
I love you, Booker. I love you, Booker. Billy, one of the I would say great thing, because it was life and death with you, but one of the big stories always circulating about you. You nearly bled out in a match there. Describe that scene and what happened during the match and what caused the bleed out and what happened at the hospital.
Okay, there was so many fantastic matches and great athletes and great entertainers at ECW. So if you ask Paul Heyman to this day, hey, name one of your favorite matches out of that 5-year run you guys were doing pay-per-views and so on, he would say Fonzie and Beulah, 2 non-wrestlers. So I worked an angle where she was a manager for Tommy Dreamer, and I was managing Sabu and Van Dam, and we built a little angle, and we ended up fighting each other. And of course, we stole the show and almost bled out. What happened was I didn't get juice all the time, so I wasn't a great juice expert. In fact, Jody Hamilton at the Armory, my first time getting juice, I let Jody zap me because he was putting the loaded thing in his mask, and he headbutted the referee, and down I go, and he says, "I'll zap you." You know what I mean? I'm not exposing the business. I'm just telling you guys. He zapped me, and then
It's too late, Bill. It's too
Yeah,
late.
yeah, Bill, it's too late.
I'm sorry, boys.
Bill, if this was 1992 or 1982, it might make.
I'd be stretched.
Yeah.
I'd be stretched.
I could be coming through that camera there.
So Jody gave me, and I got really good juice, and I flinched a little bit. That's why I got good juice. And he said, "Hey, kid, you flinched." I said, "Well, never had a blade in my head, you know." But so back to the Bill Alfonso match, we worked the angle, and for some reason at that particular time, I think it was '97, Turner was stealing our talent. It was taking the Sandman, and when I walked into the dressing room at ECW, I walked in, of course, with my suit and the Submariner and the Louis Vuitton, beautiful, came from the big territory. I walk in, and there's Sandman, Tommy Dreamer, Taz, all these guys. I didn't know who the fuck they were. I see nobody I recognized. I said, "Damn!" But Paul Heyman made all these guys big stars for. So eventually, after a couple of years, when Paul developed these guys, they were getting offers to go to WCW. And for some reason, Paul Heyman in the ECW office thought I was the middleman because Kevin Sullivan and Dusty and all them were getting our guys. And they thought I was a mold or going behind Paul Heyman's back, getting Sandman a gig and all this, but I wasn't. I didn't. They could just call the Sandman. They didn't have to call me to get Sandman. And I didn't even know this was going on. So the ECW office thought I got big juice to try to save my job, but that wasn't the case. I had no idea. They thought I was going behind their back helping, the boys go to WCW. I didn't. That's not the truth. So what happened was we designed a match. It was short, 2 non-wrestlers, and I got my little gimmick ready, my thing, and Beulah hit me with the cooking sheet. Down I go. I get a little color, and then we continue the match. We do no wrestling stuff. She puts me in the thing, hits me with a chair, all kind of silly shit. If you ever watch it, you like it, John. 7 minutes. So when she hit me with the cooking sheet, I couldn't get my gimmick out fast enough, and she was coming towards me. So at the last second before she grabbed me, I finally got it and went like this. And I gassed myself terrible. And I must have hit an artery or something. And I bled. It was the bloodiest match in ECW history. It's pretty cool to have that in my deal. So I lost so much blood when I went back, and I got the juice before the match even started, basically. And I worked for 7 minutes. And of course, I took a bunch of aspirin to thin my blood out before the match, so that the juice flows better and shit. And I get to the back. The paramedics are working on me, and they couldn't stop the bleeding. And so finally, they put this big steel thing on my head and take me up and rush me to the hospital. Get to the hospital. Head trauma, they take you right in. If you got a broken arm, you got to wait. But head trauma, they take you right in. So they took me right in, and the nurse starts unwrapping my thing. I said, "Well, please be careful because I'm bleeding." So she said, "Don't tell me. I've been a nurse for 20 years. So she undoes my thing, and the juice squirts all over her face and all over her white thing. I was happy as hell. So the doctors came in and was sewing me up, and finally fixed me up, stopped the bleeding. I got multiple stitches inside and out. It was terrible. They wanted to admit me in the hospital. I said, "No, I got a flight out. At 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm going back to Tampa, They said, "Well, you got to sign a release," and then they're wheeling me out in the wheelchair. They said, "Whatever you do, don't smoke a cigarette, don't smoke pot, no alcohol, and no pills."
They didn't know who they were talking to.
So they wheeled me out in the wheelchair. There's Sandman. He has a 44-ounce cocktail waiting for me. The car lights the joint, puts a Percocet in my mouth. Paid no attention to the doctor. So I should have been dead, But that's how we were. Well, that's one of Paul Heyman's favorite matches, if you ask him, because he's not going to put Taz over Van Dam. So that's easy out for him. Plus, it was really good entertainment. And because I bled so heavy, that's why.
Fonzie, what do you think the appeal is? I mean, I have my ideas, but you were there. You know, you have Sabu, Taz, Van Dam, you, Tommy Dreamer, the Dudleys, so many people that were such big names from ECW that even if they had done nothing else, they would still be big names. And like you say, that was only about a 5-year run, really, when you guys were rolling. What do you think the appeal is of ECW that it's lasted this long?
It was some type of phenomenon. It was different. There was only 2 companies. After the territories closed up, Florida, Georgia, Mid-Atlantic, Texas, after they all closed up and went viral on, Monday nights and national TV and stuff. There was no companies doing anything. There's a couple of small companies trying to make it, but nobody was doing anything. And Paul Heyman, who was actually brilliant for the wrestling business, his mind was really good. And he had this idea, and it was the violence and stuff they had never seen before, characters they have never seen. They didn't know who the fuck Sabu and Sandman and Tommy were. Paul Heyman made these guys big stars. It was because of the violence and controlled violence, it was just phenomenal. And I think the reason Vince bought us out because Vince's son liked ECW. He liked ECW, and I think Vince floated us $1 million to continue. Gave Paul Heyman $1 million to keep going because he liked the business or what he was trying. I guess he knew he was going to buy and bought all the rights to it. Now you can see it on Peacock from beginning, every episode of TV, every pay-per-view. Go to Peacock, there it is. The music is different, which sucks, but it's a worldwide phenomenon. I don't know, I'm telling you why I think it is, because of the violence and the new characters, and the smart marks knew it was something besides Vince and Turner, you know what I mean? And let's give it a chance, and it just took off. And
Hey, Bill.
Yes,
Bill,
sir.
do you think, with the violence and everything, do you think with the proper funding that the company would have made it down the line, or do you think that niche for that violence would have just passed them by?
We'll never know that answer.
No.
Because, we'll never know. But I think it would have continued for a while because we were we weren't selling out like Vince does and he's big. We were running small things like the Manhattan Center, Hammerstein Ballroom and all that, selling those places out and doing big business at 22 pay-per-view. We were doing really good. So I think it would have continued on for a while,
You guys were doing better than WCW at the time. So, we're
I don't know if we were drawing better, but we had people's interest. We were the talk of wrestling, the smart marks, as they call them, were talking about us.
Hey, Bill, I want to ask you, I saw an interview you did. I think I was just looking it up right there. I was trying to get the Englishman's name right because he's so good at what he does. James is a wrestling shoot interview. Jerry, what's his last name? Jerry, you did an interview with him that was excellent.
I don't know, but he is very good.
He's so good. He has such a great way about him. He's so knowledgeable. Wrote a book about The Rock. But I saw an interview you did with him, Fonzie, with James, the wrestling shoot. When you talk about Blackjack Mulligan beating up somebody, asking about speed. I don't know if Jerry's ever heard this story, and I figured Jerry, I would like to hear it.
We were in the dressing room doing TV at 106 North Albany. Then we got to drive 4 hours to Miami, after TV. So I'll tell you, I'll think of the guy's name. So we're all there watching the monitor, Mulligan sitting there. Now, Ken Barry was a big star. Barry Windham was fantastic. What a fucking athlete he was in the business. And Kendall Windham was just breaking into business, his brother. And we were all in the dressing room with a bunch of guys. And the guy's name was Buck Robley. So Buck Robley walks in and Buck Robley
Buck wasn't no coward either. Buck.
No. But Mulligan was an actual giant,
But
anyway,
either Texas or Louisiana, right?
Right.
Yeah, yes.
Louisiana.
So Buck Robley walks in and we're all watching the monitor. He just puts it out there, said, "Hey Mulligan, you got any speed?" And Mulligan kayfabe doesn't say nothing because this kid's there or whatever. You don't ask everybody in the fucking dressing room, hey, you got to hit a speed, you got to perk it. You don't have to do that,
But that's how Buck Roby was.
Yeah, especially with his kids.
Mulligan didn't answer him, and he says, hey, don't kayfabe me. Everybody knows you're the biggest speedhead in the business. And Buck Roby kept walking to that little dressing room by Charlie Lee's office.
Right.
And Mulligan got up and walked into that dressing room and closed the door. And all you could hear was boom, and fucking Buck Roby comes out of there with an eye this fucking big, and that was the end of it. It just set it straight.
Bill, so that little cubby hole outside of Charlie's office.
There was a safe in there.
Yeah, there's a safe in there, but that was what that room was basically used for so many years there. I mean, you had an issue with somebody, you usually ended up in that room with the safe there. Because
doesn't that say something bad about the territory when you got a room designed for that?
Well, it wasn't designed, it was a safe room, man. But that's
a safe room.
Yeah, you go and you take a guy in there and you were safe. Right, Bill? I mean, that thing, many a face got busted in that damn room. And Charlie walked out, and Charlie pushed those glasses up over his nose there. What time you leaving?
Wow, what a great career I've had with you guys. I can't believe I spent over a year on the road trying to break in, like I told you about Texas, and worked 6 times in Texas, and I worked a couple of times in Mid-Atlantic, then came home May 1980. I came to you and told my story in the right place at the right time. The guy got fired, and I was hired Tuesday and worked all week. At the end of the week, you said, congratulations, you're full-time with us, but remember this, you can leave as fast as you came. I never forget that, Jerry.
So Bill, which one, in all seriousness, was the greater sportatorium? The one on Katie's at Industrial or the one on Albany?
The 106 North Albany.
Oh, come on.
Way to go, Bill.
Well, I'm a Florida kid. That's why I broke in, and we had so much talent. Oh, so did you guys there. But, I got to stick up for my hometown. I refereed so many important matches and stuff. And this was the belt that Jack had and Harley Race. Oh, I've worked with Dory Funk, Harley Race, and Dusty and Flair, every world champion. This is a replica, of course. But I was so fortunate, man, and been all over the world.
Bill, Eddie Graham
took Japan 13 times. That's unusual for a referee manager. 13 times in Japan. It's crazy.
Eddie Graham took a special liking to you because you were so versatile. You'd help Eddie out with a lot of his properties and stuff like that because you knew so damn many people in this city here. But Eddie was a really unique character. We talk about Eddie, but the respect that Eddie had in this town was just unbelievable. We talk about some of the stories when he's trying to fly out of the airplane. Were you involved in any of those stories?
Yeah, absolutely. Eddie liked me after a while. Of course, it took me a while to earn their respect, like Matsuda and all those guys. But Eddie saw me get in a fight in the parking lot with a mark or something and loved it. And I was his boy after then. And I would take a great bump or whatever, and I could carry all the finishes over and so on. So Eddie took a good liking to me, and I was his guy after a while, and Matsuda loved me so. But I had to earn the respect. And Eddie was soft-spoken with me and wasn't a real talkative guy. But when he said something that meant something, and he'd always put me over. And he seen me in a couple of fights and loved it. And Eddie used to. So if a mark comes up to the office and wants to learn to be a wrestler, they have Brian Blair come down and work out with them. But he'd have to do 100 Hindu. Brian Blair was in shape. He could do 100 Hindu squats, push-ups, and all that, and blow the guy up before we got in the ring, and then really stretch him. And Eddie Graham gave him the office like that, and then Brian would really beat the fuck out of these guys stiff, and make them cry and crawl out of the 106 North Albany. And I was there for a lot of that, refereeing those little tryouts and being the third man in the ring.
Were you ever on the plane with Eddie when Eddie had a few and he's the pilot?
Yeah. Well, not too much, but here's how it went. Only the main event guys would be 4 or 5 guys in the plane, or 4 guys plus the pilot. And I think Jack Briscoe didn't make Miami. And I would ride with the preliminary guys, the first, second, and third matches, like Scott McGee, which is a great talent. Don't mean to call him, but the first matches, I would ride with the first match guys until later I met all the big shots and rode with them. But Dusty came up to me during the match and said, hey, let those guys leave early because they got a 300-mile drive back to Tampa, and you can jump in the plane with me. Eddie's flying us, and Jack didn't come, so there's a spot for you, and let those guys leave early, and then I'll take you home once we land. And so, and I wasn't a big drinker at all. I was a young kid in my early 20s, 23 years old or whatever. And I, they were giving me shots of freaking Jack Daniels, and I was getting a big buzz on. And Eddie Graham was drinking with us too, and making circles, just scaring the hell out of us, and turn one motor off and then turn it back on the plane and go sideways. It was crazy.
Eddie's drunk.
Yeah, oh yeah, he was buzzed. Yeah, it's
Eddie's turning one of the motors off on the plane.
Yes,
on the plane, in the air.
Yeah,
just on the plane a while.
It's a wonder FAA didn't meet us at the runway.
Well, they did several times.
Yeah,
it's a wonder a mortician didn't meet you at the runway.
Absolutely. Oh, so
wait a minute. When you turn the motor off, did anybody tell Eddie, that's not that funny?
No. Nope, because he would do it again if he told him.
That's great, Eddie. That's great. If you
put it over,
he'd do it the whole damn trip, right?
Yeah, if you sell it, then you're really in trouble. If you don't sell it,
you got a drunk guy. You got a drunk guy flying you on the plane, and you can't say anything because he's liable to turn all the engines off.
Yeah, something. It was crazy. But that awesome. Same night, that's the night I sucker punched Dusty. You guys want to hear that?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, we land, right? And Dusty said he would give me a ride home from the little mini airport to my home. And I was so drunk, so they had planned this all out. So they're telling me about this trash can. When we get off the plane, there's this big plastic trash can. And he says, Fonzie, everybody kicks that trash can. Mulligan kicked it 45 feet. Let's see you kick it. How far can I'm drunk? And I said, okay. So I run up in that trash can. It was screwed onto the floor, and I took a big bump. They were laughing at me and shit. And I was so drunk, it didn't matter. So I jump in Dusty's. Remember Dusty had that red dually pickup truck, Jerry?
Yeah.
So we're in that, and I'm living in Ybor City with my little wife, and a brand new baby and stuff. And I'm so drunk, I couldn't find my house. And finally, Dusty says, Fonzie, we're driving around for an hour trying to find your house. And I said, shut the fuck up. And I sucker punched Dusty. Bam, I hit him in the fucking face. I mean, stiff as hell. So he took me to the little 7-Eleven and threw my bag out and threw me out of his car and drove off. And the cops pull up because I'm drunk in the fucking parking lot at the 7-Eleven. And they got me home somehow. They found out where I live. And I told them the story about kicking the trash can and Eddie Graham, and I was a celebrity to them because I was telling the story. You know what I mean? They couldn't believe the story. I sucker punched Dusty and all them, so they didn't give me no hassle. But I did sucker punch Dusty.
Well, hey, Bill, before we let you go, I want to ask you one story because we had Lex Luger on, and
I love Lex.
Lex is such a pleasant guy. You've seen him,
God bless
and stuff.
him.
And the story with him and Brody, you were the referee in the ring that called the finish on the fly to help Lex out. Tell the story.
Well, for a year, I was in the dressing room when we gave Lex Luger his name. It was Mike Graham and Dusty and all these guys, and Matt Suda. That was Matt Suda's kid. I mean, he loved fucking Lex. He trained him and this and that. And Lex wasn't a classic worker, but he was pretty fucking good. You know what I mean? He wasn't like Barry Windham and Kurt Hennig and those guys, but he was really good. I was in the dressing room and Dusty's, they're trying to think of a name for him, and Mike Graham says, how about like a pistol, like a gun or something? Luger. Hey, Luger. Oh, good. And so he said, Lex Luger. So I was in the dressing room when they gave him his name. And he started wrestling. They pushed him from the start. He had that fantastic physique. It looked freaking great. Not a great worker yet, but never was a great worker. So they were handpicking his opponents, you know, guys that can work and getting them over in the ring and working with them on the road and stuff. And this was all in Florida, you know, the Luke, Jerry, Money, West Palm, Tampa, Miami, and so on and so on. And so they were handpicking his opponents and they were making a big star out of him. And he was getting all these big wins and shit. So the office thought it'd be a good idea. For some reason, it was a bad idea. And actually no office was there in that happened at the War Memorial in Fort Lauderdale, Jerry. They booked Lex Luger against Bruiser Brody in a cage. And now this is, you know, unusual for Lex because he's getting his opponents handpicked. They're taking care of this kid. Now he's in there with this big, terrific fucking superstar. And, you know, Brody could be a little temperamental and so on and so on. And they gave him a finish and they all agreed to it and stuff. So anyway, we got in, there was a bad booking. It should have never happened. And I was the only office personnel there when they booked this. Like Dusty wasn't there, Jerry wasn't there. I was in charge of the dressing room that night, giving all the finishes because I got from Dusty or whatever. And tell all the guys and stuff. And so there was nobody there for Bruiser Brody to complain about or Lex Luger to complain about but me. And say, hey, this is the finish and so on and so on. So the match, they get in the thing, lock the cage and the bell rings. And Luger it wasn't his fault, but he didn't know. He's trying to lock up with Brody. And I said, just listen, Lex. You know, he's a little nervous fighting this big guy, working with this big guy. He's been, you know, a big star for all these years, all those times in Japan, and huge star. And Lex and Brody wouldn't work with him. And he would no-sell Lex, and Lex didn't know what to do. And Brody started beating him up a little bit. Not shoot beat, but a kind of working beat and shit. And Lex started freaking out. Lex has got a little bit different finish. I mean, different, this is how I remember it. So fucking Lex started 4 or 5 minutes into the match. Lex starts freaking out, thinks he's going to get stretched or whatever is going through his mind, but it was no selling Lex's stuff and wouldn't talk to him in the ring or nothing. I think Brody said, who's this young kid trying to take over me in the ring? You should listen to what the fuck I say, you know? And that wasn't the case, but it wasn't Luger's fault. So Luger comes to me and says, Fonzie, what did I do? He's really nervous and scared, you know, frightened. And I said, well, just grab the referee, which is me, and throw me against the cage and I'll DQ you. And we're over, boom, boom, boom. And so that's what happened. He grabbed me and threw me, and Luger couldn't get out of that cage fast. So I think he couldn't wait for the door to get unlocked. He crawls, climbs over the cage and jumps down, goes to the dressing room. I remember this, grabs his bag, jumps in his car and leaves. There was no, in the dressing room, hey, what happened or nothing. He just fucking left. And I didn't put it over to Brody or nothing, you know, just one of those things. It was a bad booking. It should have never happened.
Did Brody say anything afterwards?
Not really. We all knew.
I mean, we watched the match. Jared and I have watched the match. We had Lex on talking about it. It tells basically the same story. You know,
similar,
Brody,
right? Yeah.
Brody never, like he was going to beat him up. Brody just quit selling. He just stood in the corner and
correct.
Didn't do anything.
Didn't register. Didn't do nothing. I don't even think he threw a punch at Luger. I think he might have hit him a couple times with a form in the back. Yeah, and Luger just freaked out. You know.
What did the boys say anything about it? This was so strange. It
was kind of strange, and I'm sure there were all kind of remarks and stuff, and maybe Luger was a little embarrassed because he didn't know what to do, or, you know, and I told him, I said, hey, just settle down, just listen, you know, whatever Brody says, do it, you know, and it was like talking to a deer in the headlights. Luger couldn't really hear me, you know, he was worried about what was going on. He's worried about his career, they handpicking his opponents. He's the next big star, and he became a big star, you know, but no, Brody let us know about it in the ring. You know what I mean? Yeah. He let us know what his intentions were in the ring. No sell this kid. Who the fuck does this kid think he is? I'm Bruiser Brody. Don't know, you know. Wait, fucking settle down. I'll walk you through the mats, make you a little bit, but I'm Bruiser Brody. You know what I mean?
One thing you can say for sure: bad booking.
Bad booking, yeah.
Absolutely. And I was the only office personnel there.
And that's another mistake to me, not having some office guy. And then you got a star that you're building to be the biggest star in your territory, and you're not there one of the biggest, most important advancement matches ever in his career. You're not there. Somebody from the office is not there to give instructions out. To me,
Matt wasn't there either.
It was a poor office decision.
Yeah,
But
right.
Bill, I got something. Speaking of John, speaking of trips, we go on these trips all over. You see all kinds of wildlife. Bill, do you remember here? I'm going to try to get him over there, right in that corner, up in that corner there. You see that bobcat? You remember that bobcat?
Didn't I give that to you?
You gave it to me, yeah. You stuffed you and I think Andre. Coming
Yeah.
back from Fort Myers, you guys, it ran out in front of you. You hit it, and you're an old cracker redneck like me. And I'm not going to let that thing on the side of the road. You took it and wadded it up, put it in a plastic bag, put it in the ice chest, froze it for me. You couldn't find a guy. He was telling me about this guy down there in Odessa that would stuff it for me. Well, I took it down and got the stuff, but Bill Alfonso and Andre gave me that.
So Bill, you ran over the wildcat on the road?
And not a scratch on him. It was like a miracle. I was going 70 miles an hour. For somehow I hit the bobcat and he took a flip and bump and he was dead. But his body wasn't mangled. There wasn't a cut. There was no juice. I don't know how that happened.
That's what the guy said that fixed him for. He said, I've never seen an animal that got hit by a car in this good a shape. But Roddy Piper, I let Roddy stay here. We were working Carolinas. Let Roddy stay here at my house one time. And I used to have my bobcat over on the fireplace there. So you walk in the door and you walk around the corner. And if the moon's out just right, it hits that cat's eyes, and the cat's in an aggressive position. Roddy walking in a dark house, he don't know where he's at. I live out in the country, and he comes in. I told him nobody's lived there for a couple of months that I know of. There might be somebody kept out in there. So Piper comes in, he got his gun. Him and his wife walk around the corner. He sees this cat, and the cat's eyes glare at him, and the cat's in an aggressive position. Roddy pulls his gun out, and Kitty has to pull him back. No, that's stuffed cat. So he was going to shoot our cat.
Can I tell you a cool story about Piper and an alligator?
Sure.
So Piper comes down to work the territory. You know how we used to come in for the week, and the Moolah come in for the week, make the loop, the champion come in for the week, the midgets to come in for a week. So Piper was a big TBS or whatever the fuck he was. I guess Jim Crockett guy. And so Dusty brought him in for the week, and so he jumped in the car. We did TV on Wednesday and then drove down to Miami. It was me, Kevin Sullivan, a guy named, you remember this name, you might too, John. Remember the Dusiks?
Yeah.
But there was a kid, one of their sons, Frank
Wally Dusick, wasn't it?
Well, I think Wally Dusick was one of the fathers, or Frank Dusick was one of the kids. I know who you're
talking about. He's Carolina.
So anyways, I'm driving the car. Frank's in the back, Kevin Sullivan's in the front, and Piper's behind me. We're going down Alligator Alley, but we had to go through Immokalee that wasn't 75 all the way down like it is now, and that canal would run parallel with us, and there'd be all kind of alligators. And now Piper's a Canadian, and he's freaking out. He's seen these big alligators, and Mike, you can't believe it. The first time he's seen a live alligator, just laying on the bank, and hundreds of them, here and there. So Piper's going nuts, and he said, man, I wish I had a gun. And Frank Dusick says, I got a gun. Pull over. So we pull over, and Frank Dusick pulls out this old 38 stub nose pistol, and now the alligator's laying on the bank across the canal, and there's no way Piper's going to shoot this alligator. No way. Or he's going to attempt to. He said, oh my God, give me the gun. And while out there watching him, he's so excited, and he takes aim at the alligator. He pulls the trigger, bam! He hits the alligator. It hits him in the neck or something, and the alligator starts selling, and he crawls in the water, and he flips upside down. Now he's laying he's laying upside down, floating in the water. He's dead, we think. And so Piper starts fucking taking his clothes off. He's down to his underwear, and Kevin Sullivan says, I'll go down about 30 or 40 feet and splash the water and attract the other alligators towards me. Meanwhile, Piper, you swim across the canal, grab the dead alligator, and bring him back. He wanted the alligator. So Kevin Sullivan goes down, starts splashing here, and the alligators kind of move over there, and Piper's down to his white underwear and gets in the water. He's about halfway to the alligator, and the alligator was working. He flips back over, and he starts chasing Piper, and Piper freaks out. It looked like a cartoon. You remember the Road Runner when he would run in place like a cartoon? And he was swimming like that. So Piper comes back to the shore, and you can't believe it. And as soon as that happens, Highway Patrol pulls up. Says, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" And we're explaining. We didn't tell him we shot the alligator, of course, but you know, and he had his clothes back on. We're just showing the Canadian alligator and all that. And he, you know, he put us over because we told him the wrestling and all that, so we were cool. But that's a pretty cool story.
So when the cop pulled up, was Piper still in his underwear?
No, he had got dressed. He got dressed. So we would have had to explain the underwear. Why the fuck was in the underwear? It's soaking wet. But
Jerry, why was Piper walking through your house with a gun?
Well, he was staying in my house, and I was working Carolina. My wife and I moved up there. She was having Wes at the time, so her parents are up there, so she wanted to be up there. So Piper was going to take a Florida vacation. He's going to rent a hotel and all this. I said, "Roddy, my house is down there. Nobody's been at it for 6 months. Just go down there in 3 days, and you can go get a hotel if you want to. But, you know, just check my house out here. Here's a key." So I loaned him my house, you know, for 3 days. And so he's afraid. He's a Canadian, like Bill was saying. So him and his wife are walking in. It's a dark house. Now, my power box, you got to go past that cat to get to my power box. And I forgot to tell him the cat was there, but I told him where the power box was. So he was coming around the corner, go to the power box, and all of a sudden those eyes, his moonlight got him, and those eyes are glaring at him. He carrying a gun. He takes the gun out and getting ready to shoot. And Kitty's, no, it's not live. He could have blown my whole damn house up, you know. He's just been a nice guy and letting Hot Rod stay in my house for 3 days, you know. But I got to give him credit, man. He mowed my yard. Him and Kitty, you know, all the dust from being setting for 6 months, cleaned the house up for her. No, they did awesome, man.
Oh, it's awesome.
And Bill, we really appreciate the time that you spent with us today, man. We relived some old stories, some old road stories, and a lot of ECW, a lot of Florida, and, you know, I talked about the giant Gonzalez a little bit. Man, it's been a great day here with you. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, guys. Hey, remember I told you that I want to read off my that I'm still relevant to the business because I was the.
And by the way, where can they book? You got an email or anything like that?
Oh yeah, Bill Alfonso .real@icloud.com. I'm on all the social media, Instagram, Facebook, and all that. I get messages all the time, and please call me if you're interested. But so I just got back I did a show in Cleveland for AIW, nice little company up there. They had about 700 people in their audience. This weekend, I'm in Detroit hosting a Super Bowl party, getting paid really good for that, flying me up, hotel.
Super Bowl party.
On the
Super Bowl party, Bill.
Yeah, WrestleMania. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Same thing. Same thing, right?
Yeah, we can give you a spoiler on the Super Bowl. Who won?
Yeah.
I love Vince McMahon. Anyway, so I just got back from Cleveland this weekend. I'm in Detroit on the 3rd. I'm in Miami on the 8th. I'm in somewhere in fucking Ohio doing a big time convention for Dylan Himes, RBD, the Bobby Fulton convention, whatever. I'm going to do something for Vice TV next, somewhere between the 11th and the 14th. They want to fly me to Atlanta. They're doing something, not the dark side of the ring, but something else.
The territories, right?
Correct. So they called me and I said, of course, I would love to be in. And I was telling stories. They were asking. I was telling them the same thing.
You and I might be on the same plane.
Okay. So then after that, I'm in Port St. Lucie. I'm in
So your
West
calendar's full.
Virginia, Daytona Beach. I'm like at 8 bookings this month.
Wow.
And all, they meet my talent fee, which is terrific, which is great. And, they fly me up. So I'm still relevant because I'm still doing things like this, and I'm personable and people can approach me. I get Fonzie chance when I go to the ring sometimes. And I'm really good with the fans at conventions. I give away a lot of shit. I blew a whistle in ECW. That was my gimmick, right? So I had some of these made up, and I ordered 1,000 of them. I sold 700 of them. I'm the only guy in the business with the whistle. They cost me small money to make, and I sell them for $20 signed. I sold 700, gave 300 away. So I'm making a little something, and I'm having a good time. I'm still relevant. I'm not killing myself, just working weekends, having a good time doing podcasts. Usually I get a talent fee for podcasts, but there's no way I'm expecting anything. It would not even bring it up, but I get paid.
Well, I'm glad because we don't have one.
Okay, I would never ask, but no, I do a lot of podcasts, and I get a little talent fee. The boys are doing it during the virus. We weren't working, so I was doing podcasts, and my niece put an ad out, say, hey, Fonzie available for podcasts, and people would call. I probably did 20 podcasts during the virus. Wow. And got paid a small talent fee, which is great. And they loved it. They PayPal me instantly for me to tell them stories, Well, so Fonzie, I'm still creating a little revenue is what I'm saying. I'm so happy to be on your show. Thank you so much, guys. Jerry Brisco, Gerald, you know how much I love you and care about you. John, you're fantastic to be in the sports entertainment business with us. You're a big star, and congratulations on your career, and God bless both of you guys, man.
Well, Fonzie, when Jerry told me you're going to be on, we've never had a chance to visit, and I was really looking forward to it. This has been an absolute pleasure. So you're an icon, and can't thank you enough for coming on our show.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.